Hello, and welcome back to the Christian review of the God Delusion. This time I'm going to be in chapter 2. Now, I'm not going to be able to get through the entire chapter this time. There's way too much to say. It would take like 5 hours. So I'm basically going to go through his introduction and his first section on polytheism. So we're not even going to touch on monotheism or on the other things. He spends more time talking about agnosticism, relationship between science and religion. That would be way too much to cover. But just in these something less than 10 pages, there's a lot to talk about. So he opens it with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. The religion of one age is the literary entertainment of the next. So, what is he talking about here? He's talking about in ancient times, people believed that the gods of Greece and Rome and stuff were real. But now we simply read them as literature, as entertainment. And he's saying that's what will happen with with Christianity. Now, what's the problem with this claim? It hasn't been proven. People still believe in Christianity. They believed in it in ancient times when people believed in the gods of Greece and Rome. Then they believed in the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance, they believed in modern times. The end of Christianity has not come. People will say, oh, it's coming, but it keeps coming, but it never actually comes. For example, you may have heard the quote from that the Beatles are bigger than Jesus, more popular than Jesus. The original context of the quote is, Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right and I'll be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus was all right, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. That's a compelling argument. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me. Now, this is from John Lennon. This is 50 years ago when he's predicting that Christianity will go away. Well, 50 years later, hasn't really gone anywhere. Now people are like, it will. It's going to go away at some point. But hasn't. Christopher Hitchens once said that the point of a good argument is that it can be disproved. It's not an argument that can be disproved because no matter how many times Christianity doesn't go away, they just say, well, it will. People have been predicting this for centuries, hasn't happened. Kind of reminds me of the quote from Thanos in Endgame. I am inevitable. That's a good movie, by the way. You should see it. I don't care if you only have $15 to feed your family. Don't feed your family. Just watch Endgame instead. Family's overrated. So that's basically opens it trying to say that all the religions, including Christianity, are going to go away. Now, that's a quote. What Richard Dawkins actually opens it with is, the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. You tell us how you really feel. I've never understood how atheists feel like they have the right to judge God. I mean, gives you that right. He's your creator. You are created by him, for him. How on earth do you get the ability to say, no, you shouldn't do that? That was wrong of you. What? It's like Romans 9. Who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Or as it goes on to quote Isaiah 29:16, which says, you turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? That the thing made shall say of its maker, he did not make me. Or the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding. That seems like a pretty compelling analogy. Why does the clay get to yell at the potter? I don't get that. And it goes beyond that. Where are you getting this ideas? What is wrong with these things? Why is it wrong to be petty? Why is it wrong to be unjust? Why is it wrong to be unforgiving? Why is it wrong to be a control freak? Why is it wrong to be vindictive? Why is it wrong to be bloodthirsty? This could take up the whole video. The point is, all this stuff, you're making moral statements. You're not backing that up. I think that it is wrong to be bloodthirsty, because that is not loving, because all people are made in the image of God and have value, and because God has told us to treat them as they have value, and to show love to all people. But you're rejecting that. You're rejecting that God. You're saying he doesn't exist, and even if he does exist, you don't like him, which is actually biblical. The Bible says that people who reject the true God don't really reject him intellectually, they hate him. All unregenerates hate God. My point is here, if you don't have God, then where are you getting these ideas from? Why is it wrong to hate people, to kill people? Like, where are you getting the standard for morals from, if not God? Dawkins, I will spend 2 chapters trying to prove this. He does not succeed. The moral argument will remain unanswered because it is unanswerable, and few atheists want to acknowledge this. So that's just his opener. He goes on and then to say, it is unfair to attack such an easy target. Actually, no, hold on. Jumped ahead of myself. There is one insult here that I wanted to spend more time rebutting. I don't agree with the vast majority of his descriptors of God here, and I don't have time to rebut every single one. But one I found very interesting was unforgiving. God is not unforgiving. He is so forgiving, he sent his Son, God the Son, Jesus Christ, to die for the sins of the world, to satisfy his justice, so that he could forgive the unforgivable. I may say, hold on, Dawkins is not talking about the New Testament, he's talking about the Old Testament. I know he is. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 5. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. far from being unforgiving. God, the God of the Bible, Old and New Testament, is the most forgiving God ever thought of. All other religions, you have to do something to earn forgiveness. Most religions will acknowledge that people need forgiveness, but it's not free forgiveness. You have to do something to get that forgiveness. The Bible says no, only trust in Jesus, because you can't do anything to get forgiveness, but forgiveness is being offered to you anyway. So to characterize God, the God of the Bible, Old or New Testament, as unforgiving is absurd. He goes on, it is unfair to attack such an easy target. God hypothesis should not stand or fall with its most unlovely instantiation, Yahweh, nor his insipidly opposite Christian face, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. To be fair, this milksop persona owes more to his Victorian followers than to Jesus himself. Now it's good that he acknowledges this. Jesus, the biblical Jesus, was far from a milksop, as anyone who's read the New Testament can tell you. I don't know why he'd bring it up if he acknowledges that's not even what the Bible teaches, other than to get another shot in. But he goes on that instead he wants to criticize just the general God hypothesis. I shall define the God hypothesis more defensively. There exists a superhuman, supernatural intelligence who deliberately designed and created the universe and everything in it, including us. This book will advocate an alternative view. Any creative intelligence of sufficient complexity to design anything comes into existence only at the end product of an extended process of gradual evolution. Now this is, we'll see later in the book, his main reason for rejecting God. He thinks someone that complex cannot be at the beginning, he must be in the future. I am not here to defend just the general God hypothesis. I am here to defend the true triune God of the Bible, that he exists in everything he says is true. And Dawkins will focus on that. Sometimes we'll go on to other things. I'm generally going to focus on criticisms he makes of Christianity, not Islam or any of the other religions. So then he says, historians of religion recognize a progression from primitive tribal animisms through polytheisms such as those of the Greeks, Romans, and Norsemen to monotheisms such as Judaism and its derivatives, Christianity and Islam. Now, this is a very common belief that religion goes from animism to polytheism to monotheism, and later some, like Dawkins, would add atheism. It's not as simple as that. Mormonism, which was invented in the 19th century, is the most polytheistic religion in history. And many atheist countries, such as China, are having a massive growth of Christianity. So it's not a clear direction of history. It's not Thanos's inevitability idea. All this teaches us is that idolatry never goes away. It simply evolves. Now the actual polytheism section. It's interesting, Dawkins is trying to claims he's trying to go after all religions indiscriminately. He doesn't have a certain agenda against Christianity, but yet in his polytheism section he does very little to criticize polytheistic religions like Hinduism. He immediately talks about how I don't think it's fair to say that monotheism is considered better than polytheism, and I don't think it's fair that monotheistic religions have tax-exempt status as charities, but polytheistic religions don't. Like, he even talking about polytheism, he can't help but go after monotheism, because that goes after the God he truly hates. So, talking about the charitable, and then, so really, yeah, this whole section is just mostly saying polytheistic religions are not worse than monotheistic religions, and Christianity is a polytheistic religion because we believe in the Trinity. So when talking about the charitable things, he says, far better, of course, would be to abandon the promotion of religion altogether as grounds for charitable status. So what he's saying is, he doesn't believe churches or other religious organizations should have tax-exempt status. He seems to think that this is another example of religions getting special treatment. Actually, what he's advocating is religions getting negative special treatment. Like, it's not like religious organizations are the only organizations to not have to pay taxes. Non-profits generally don't have to pay taxes. What he's arguing is that non-profits should not have to pay taxes unless if they promote religion, in which case they should. Now, of course, what he would say is they're not non-profits. He would say, he says, the benefits of this to society would be great, especially in the United States, where the sums of tax-free money sucked in by churches and polishing the heels of already well-heeled televangelists reached levels that could fairly be described as obscene. So he's basically saying, some mega church pastors, especially televangelists, they get a ridiculous amount of money from church donations, so they should not be considered non-profits. Is he saying that that's what every pastor does? No pastor simply has a modest salary? Like, what about the pastors that's just struggling to make ends meet, can barely feed his family, and is having trouble keeping the church bills paid and stuff? He also has to pay taxes, and you may say, well, everyone else does. Again, that's not true. Non-profits usually don't. And it is not just churches where organizations abuse their non-profit status. Planned Parenthood, for example, a very evil organization, that they make a tremendous amount of profit, but still do not have to pay any taxes. In fact, get tax money, which is something churches generally don't get. But apparently, if you promote religion, that somehow makes you especially evil and need to be taxed, even if you're acting exactly like any other nonprofit does. And he goes into the example of Oral Roberts and says that he told them that God would kill him unless they gave him $8 million. And his audience gave him $8 million, and he didn't have to pay any taxes on it. Is his argument that it would be okay if he got his money, but then paid some of it to taxes? I don't think so. I think he'd still say that's outrageous. So how is this really an argument against that? I don't know. Again, we're moving far away from arguments as to whether or not God exists and who he is. again, he'll get to that, but it seems so strange that a book that is all about debunking the God Delusion talks so much about political issues and things like that. Now then he gets to the Trinity, and like I said, tries to argue that it's polytheistic. He says, rivers of medieval ink, not to mention blood, have been squandered over the mystery of the Trinity, and in suppressing deviations such as the Arian heresy. Arius of Alexandria in the 4th century AD denied that Jesus was consubstantial, i.e. of the same substance or essence with God. And he says, yet the controversy split Christendom down the middle for a century, and the Emperor Constantine ordered that all copies of Arius's books should be burned, splitting Christendom by splitting hairs, such has ever been the way of theology. So he's trying to argue that the Trinity is an unimportant document that people were just splitting hairs about. That's ridiculous. It's incredibly important to know the God who saved you, because if he saved you to glorify himself, and then you're glorifying a figment of your imagination that you're calling God, that doesn't get him glory. And when he says that, he talks about Constantine burning Arius's books, that's true. People often talk about the Christians persecuting the Arians, which I think is indefensible, but people don't typically talk about how before that the Arians would persecute the Christians. Again, not to defend this, but why is it the Christians are the only people that get criticized for this, and then when Christians are persecuted by Arians and others, it doesn't get too much mention? Again, only if your true enemy is not religion, but the triune God of the Bible. So he goes to Jefferson. He likes quoting Thomas Jefferson. And he says that Jefferson heaped ridicule on the doctrine that, as he put it, there are three gods in his critique of Calvinism. Now, there is so much wrong with that statement. I don't know where we get it. The doctrine of the Trinity is not that there are three gods. That is Arianism. The doctrine of the Trinity, as articulated in the Nicene Creed, was specifically articulated that way to refute the idea that there are three gods, and instead say that there is one God in three distinct persons, that the Father, Son, and Spirit are different from each other. They are God, fully God, truly God, and yet there is only one God. That is the doctrine of the Trinity, specifically first articulated in that manner to refute the idea that there are three gods. So it's insane to use that as a descriptor of the Trinity. And then he says in his critique of Calvinism, the Trinity is not just a Calvinistic idea. It's like, I am a Calvinist, but Arminians are Monists, even Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, all true Christianity and even some false versions of Christianity adhere to the Trinity. So it's very bizarre to say that he had this in his critique of Calvinism. Then he goes on to finally actually talk about religions that could be described as, that would normally be described as polytheistic. I guess he thought that was kind of worth mentioning in one paragraph of the section on polytheism. I am aware that critics of religion can be attacked for failing to credit the fertile diversity of traditions and worldviews that have been called religious. anthropologically informed works from Sir James Fraser's Golden Bough to Pascal Boyer's Religion Explained or Scott Aitken's In Gods We Trust fascinatingly document the bizarre phenomenology of superstition and ritual. Read such books and marvel at the richness of human gullibility. Now, I would affirm that whole paragraph, except I would not say gullibility, I would say idolatry. Marvel at the riches of human idolatry. Again, as the Bible teaches, humans were made to worship. That is why we exist. And so if we don't worship God, the true God, we'll worship something else. Maybe often we will call it God, sometimes we won't. Sometimes we'll be, as Dawkins talks about in the first chapter, a deeply religious non-believer. But we'll worship something. We can't not worship anything. Now there's one quote that was a bit before this quote, but I was saving it for the end, because I think it's really interesting. Dawkins is quoting Thomas Jefferson again, talking about the Trinity. Ridicule is the only weapon which can be used against unintelligible propositions. Ideas must be distinct before reason can act upon them, and no man ever had a distinct idea of the Trinity. He is absolutely right. No one has ever been able to really comprehend the doctrine of the Trinity. We've been able to articulate it, to believe it, but we've never been able to really understand or comprehend it. What does that mean? It means that it's not a man-made idea. For someone to come up with an idea, obviously they would have to understand it. But no one can understand the Trinity. It is beyond human comprehension, as you would expect it to be if, as Dawkins likes to say, God is so complex. You would imagine that God, you wouldn't be able to comprehend God. Is he trying to say that if there really were this supreme being that created the entire universe, Richard Dawkins or Austin Burton would be able to comprehend it? That, of course, the nature of God would not be able to have us fully wrap our minds around him, his nature. And so, if humans cannot even comprehend it, then we couldn't create it, which means there would have to be something God revealed to us, because only he can comprehend his true nature. So that was another half hour on 8 pages. I'll get into his section on monotheism in the next video. Until next time, hopefully this has been helpful, and God bless you.